Hello everyone, I'm David Davis, aka Rainbow Runner. Now, the day I'm recording this is December 18th of 2025. Exactly 10 years ago today, one of easily my most anticipated movies ever came out. That being Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens. And exactly 10 years ago today, I was doing my final Star Wars marathon with one of my close friends, Menlo Grohman. Now, I figured on the 10th anniversary of The Force Awakens, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a retrospective, overview of my experiences going into The Force Awakens and how huge it was for me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a context. So I was born in the year 2000, and of course, I and a lot of Gen Zers, Star Wars was obviously a quintessential part of my childhood, and it wasn't just the movies, but it was some other things like the Lego Star Wars games. I have the 2002 Clone Wars game on the original Xbox, and even things like Star Tours, the original version, which I went on several times when I went to Disneyland with my family. Sorry, that was my laundry basket. But anyways, needless to say, my love for Star Wars was cemented quite firmly early on by a lot of those a lot of those things. I might slide off again, sorry, but I was a passionate Star Wars fan, although I will say during the early 2010s I actually had a little bit of a recession period from my love for Star Wars. I mean, I still liked it, but I wasn't as passionate about it for a while. I did see a few things like the Phantom Menace when they did the 3D the 3D release back in 2012. And they ended up canceling the 3D releases of the other live action films at the time. But yeah, Phantom Menace 3 was the first time I saw a live action Star Wars movie in theaters. Now, of course, end of October 2012, that was when Disney bought Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise, and they announced the sequel trilogy. But it wasn't until the beginning of 2015 that my passion for Star Wars was renewed in such a huge way. And it was almost like experiencing the franchise for the first time, if you will. And a lot of that was, at the beginning of January 2015, which right after I began my second semester of my 8th grade year of junior high, my family took me to Disneyland after I'd been clamoring to go back since 2012. And I remember one of the nights when we were just in the hotel, I had my iPod Touch, and I looked up clips of all of the lightsaber duels from the existing 6 movies at the time. And then later that January, I ended up hurting my wrist. And then that weekend, while I was kind of just sitting around recovering from it, I ended up rewatching all 6 of the existing movies at the time in a single weekend. So it ended up being Phantom Menace on Friday night, and then Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and A New Hope throughout the day on Saturday. And then Sunday afternoon, after church, in the afternoon evening, I watched Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And for the longest time, I did my viewings of the Star Wars movies on the DVD releases that were, the widescreen DVD, 2-disc DVD releases. I've had these since Christmas of 2007. And then in a similar situation, I had the 1997 special edition VHS box set for the original trilogy. That was how my family's had this set for as long as I can remember. New Hope, Empire, and Jedi. Yeah, so of course those are the main home video releases that I grew up with for the Star Wars movies. I had a similar marathon happen. Well, I actually did several marathons of episodes 1 through 6 throughout 2015. I mean, 2015 was such a great year in my personal life in general, but a lot of what made that good was, again, that renewed passion for Star Wars I had. So I did another single weekend marathon, I believe around President's Day in February. Then March, I was on spring break, so I was able to I did all 6 of them on separate days, not like on the same day or anything. But April was actually did something a little bit different, and it's began a little bit of a trend that I would follow. Uh, I would ride my bike up to the Goodwill, and I went to hunt down some older copies of the original trilogy so I could see their cuts before the 1997 special editions. So that's when I was able to get these. This is the 92 sets, the 92 VHS releases of each of the original trilogy films. And that was ended up how I watched the original trilogy when I did my April marathon. I still had all the 3 of the prequels on DVD, but then I actually did not one but two different marathons in May. And at the beginning of May, I got The Phantom Menace on VHS. Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that during this year, I found Nathan Butler and his channel and his series from the Star Wars Home Video Library, which kind of enticed me to start a little bit of, home media collecting. I mean, I've had VHS tapes for a long time, but this was specifically hunting down, other older tapes and copies of the films. And with the Phantom Menace in particular, the VHS actually has differences when transitioning from the VHS to the DVD, because the VHS used the theatrical cut. So that was interesting to see. So my first marathon of May 2015, I watched the Phantom Menace VHS, the DVDs of Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then the original trilogy, all again on the 92 copies. But then at the end of May, on Memorial Day weekend, I went back to, the DVDs and the 97 tapes for that marathon. And then I did the same thing in June, watching those copies. And then July, I once again did Phantom Menace, this VHS, and then for the original trilogy, the 92 copies. Though I stopped doing my marathons around July. Well, at least constantly doing my marathons. Just eased back a little bit, because there were plenty of other things that happened during 2015 beyond beyond my Star Wars and passions being renewed. Many things that made that year great. Well, I guess back on the topic of Star Wars, I did go to a Star Wars Day game at Chase Field against, with D-backs playing the Giants that game. We ended up losing that game, but still, that was cool. And yeah, I did cut out some, I did ease back a little bit on the Star Wars binging. August, September, October, and November. Because there were other good things that happened, like I said, during 2015 that made that year outstanding. Of course, 2015 being the year that Back to the Future Part 2 happened, though we didn't quite get the hoverboards. Cubs were a year off on winning the World Series that year. But I will say, my Star Wars hype had allowed me to kind of overlook some other movies. Of course, 2015 was also the year that Inside Out came out, but I regrettably never got to see it in theaters, at least not back then. I did recently at Pollock Cinemas, but yeah. But aside from that, 2015, again, pretty good year in my opinion. Well, my sister Melody left on her mission in October. 2015, I began my freshman year of high school. And then also on Thanksgiving that year, my family, well, that being my older brother, who was a senior at the time, and then my parents, well, we went to California, Medieval Times and Universal Studios. And then we had one day at Disneyland. Disneyland Park only no California Adventure, but that was because Tomorrowland was doing the whole season of the Force event to, promote the Force Awakens coming up. And I think that moment was when I was starting to, renew my passion, kind of get back into the swing of the things with Force Awakens coming out. I know they had the Path of the Jedi thing that they showed in the theater under Space Mountain. And then, of course, Hyperspace Mountain was a cool overlay for Space Mountain, with it being timed to John Williams' score and all that stuff. And then I also remember Star Tours added a segment from The Force Awakens on Jakku to the randomized flight sequence. But then everything was building up to December, and The Force Awakens came out on December 18th, and I finished the last day of the first semester of my freshman year of high school was on December 17th. So the 16th and 17th, I was taking final exams. And I will say my freshman year of high school was probably the year in my K-12 years I struggled the most academically, but I did manage to make it through. So I remember I finished my final exams on the 17th, and then I got out of school going across the street to the Little Caesars, because I actually had a tradition that that I did during my high school years. I went to Chandler High School, by the way, graduated in 2019. But yeah, the tradition was I would get a hot and ready pizza from Little Caesars at the end of the week that marks the halfway point during the quarter, and then on the last day of the quarter as well. So yeah, so this time around, back at the end in 2015, December, there was no different at the end of my first quarter. So my brother picked up me and my friend Menlo, and he drove us home. But then, but before getting started on our marathon, I went with Menlo back to his house so we could get his bike, and we rode our bikes down to the Circle K close to our house so we can get Polar Pops. And then we started our marathon. I was out in the common area, of course, or I guess in the living room area, I guess kind of kitchen by the fireplace. But anyways, we had the TV up there in a Blu-ray player, so I was able to watch we did the Phantom Menace. I think after we finished that, Menlo showed me a little bit of the Battlefront, because he brought Battlefront. He has a copy of Star Wars Battlefront on the original Xbox that he brought over so we could play it on my Xbox a little bit. That was one of the big things that we did when we weren't watching the movies. But it was after the Phantom Menace, Menlo went home for a little bit, so I was kind of by myself when I did Attack of the Clones going into the evening. And I know, like, during the time I was watching episode 2, I got dinner. Like, my parents brought me Elmer's. Of course, Elmer's being the Mexican food restaurant across the street from Chandler High School. Yeah, and then, yeah, I'm assuming, like, when Menlo was home, he watched Attack of the Clones on his own time. Though later that evening, he came back for Revenge of the Sith. And I do remember, like, well, he brought his bike into the garage, and remember by the time he left, like, I accidentally forgot to close the garage door. But anyways, when he came back over, I made some hot chocolate so we could enjoy it while we started Revenge of the Sith, or I guess while we watched Revenge of the Sith. I think I also had like some cookies and other things to do. And then, well, I also remember we were watching a little bit of the How It Should Have Ended videos for Star Wars, because I know How It Should Have Ended uploaded vids for Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as part of the hype for, The Force Awakens coming out. So then we go on to December 18th. Now, December 18th was, of course, the day The Force Awakens premiered, but I didn't go see it until the 19th. But I remember that Friday, December 18th, it was the day we were watching the original trilogy. And I want to say my dad actually was very much on top of things. He was able to he went out, bought like several bags of microwavable popcorn, 2-liter bottles of Coke and Mountain Dew, and also some of those Walmart sub sandwiches, just to, have things ready for my marathon. But Menlo would not come over until the evening, so kind of in the afternoon, I eventually went to, start the original trilogy with, A New Hope, again, on VHS, my 1997 copy. But then I left, me and my parents left for a bit. I went to see my uncle, who's a chiropractor. But I remember while I was in his office, that's when my brother told me that Menlo was over at my house. And Kevin and Menlo were playing a little bit on the Xbox, again, this Battlefront game. And then I eventually did come back over and I joined Menlo for a little bit playing Battlefront, but then we started the original trilogy. Well, I'm assuming Menlo watched A New Hope while he was away, but we eventually got to do Empire Strikes Back and, Return of the Jedi. Now, of course, because I only had the original trilogy on VHS at the time, Menlo and I, of course, had to watch it in this room up, on the TV with the VCR. We were sitting on my bed. Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. Though I know beforehand for Empire Strikes Back, I put in the tape and then I fast forwarded about 5 seconds out of play, and then it was still in the behind the scenes for the special editions, and then fast forward it to where the Fox Video logo shows, and then of course it has the THX logo, the Lucasfilm logo, and then it goes into the movie. But thankfully, Menlo and I were sitting up on our bed, and we made a good system where we had our bowl of popcorn, and we had 2 drink cups. Menlo had Mountain Dew, and I had Coke. We were able to make the situation work, and it was a good experience, chatting. And I was basically, as the movie went along, I was chatting like some things like how, in my opinion, Luke should have killed the Wampa and spent the night in the cave on Hoth, so he wouldn't, be freezing in the snowstorm. And I guess some other plot points as we were going along. And then I was also noting some of all the different special edition changes that happened, with the Emperor being replaced, because this was the 1997 version we were watching. This was before they had Ian McDiarmid replacing Clive Revel and Marjorie Eaton, I think her name was. And let's see, I remember we paused the movie right after the moment when Yoda lifts Luke's X-wing out of the swamp, so that we could take a break, use the bathroom, and we also got more popcorn and soda for the rest of the movie. I also remember during that time, I moved Menlo's bike into the garage because he parked it on the front porch, so I just wanted to be out of the way. But then we watched the rest of the movie, and I know we were kind of quoting along during the "I am your father" scene, and then, well, also because this is the 97 version, this was the only version of the movie where Luke is screaming as he's falling down after dropping off the platform, and that change was retracted in the 2004 version. But it was so jarring, but also kind of funny that it matched the Emperor's death scream in Return of the Jedi. So yeah, Empire was done, and then not too long after, we did Return of the Jedi as well. So with Empire, I, ahead of time put the tape in the VCR and I fast forwarded it. I fast forwarded it not in play about 20 seconds, though when I hit play, it was already at the THX logo, so I actually rewound it a little bit just to get to the end of the behind the scenes stuff, and again at the Fox Video logo, just before the THX logo. But then Return of the Jedi again we had some good discussions. I think we were several times quoting Admiral Akbar, "It's a trap!" I think at moments like when the Ewoks capture the group, and I think some other things at the end when Force Ghost Anakin appears, I guess Obi-Wan and Yoda as well. But this was before, this was the version when it still had Sebastian Shaw before Hayden Christensen replaced. And I never had a problem with Hayden Christensen replacing Sebastian Shaw, by the way. So yeah, we finished with Return of the Jedi, and after we were done with that, we were just pretty much chilling, hanging out until I think roughly 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the morning on December 19th. And my plan was, because again I was only 15 at the time, I was riding, Menlo and I rode our bikes to basically get around him. I was riding halfway to, I decided to kind of escort him halfway to his house before turning back and coming home. It was interesting. I think we were leaving, but then we turned back to go to my house because I think Menlo forgot something. But then the second time we were going, I know Menlo's mom was like coming, driving in her car just to check on us. But no, he was able to ride back to his house, and I turned around. And I think I went to bed that night around 2 a.m. Though I know beforehand I once again played the music for the ending celebration music from Return of the Jedi. But then we get to December 19th of 2015. So I woke up that morning, took a shower, and did all the usual stuff to get ready. And then in the afternoon, my parents, along with my brother Kevin and I, we picked up Menlo, and then we went to the Harkins, specifically Chandler Crossroads. And it wasn't just, everyone in my immediate family at the time, and well, at least like who could be. Again, Melly was on her mission, but Menlo was there. My brother Kevin actually had his friend David come along, and then my Uncle Paul and Aunt Lorna also came along as well. But we were able to get good seats in the theater, and I remember hearing groaning. I think it may have been from my brother, but like basically saying, like when Luke Skywalker has vanished, appeared on the opening crawl, and then I was trying so hard to hold back my tears when at Han Solo's death. But I remember the ending was pretty cool, like when the duel between Rey and Kylo Ren, and then the ending when Rey goes to find Luke on Octu, if I'm saying that right. And I do remember sitting through the credits, of course, because it's John Williams music, it's awesome. But I was blown away by The Force Awakens, and I later went to see it again with my brother at the Glendale Drive-In Theater back in April or February of 2016. And yeah, so yeah, those are my experiences with The Force Awakens, and I really do have a soft spot for The Force Awakens. I mean, I understand like the sequel trilogy, it has a lot of issues, well, especially with Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. I mean, it's sad to revisit The Force Awakens nowadays, considering what could have been, but I do hold a soft spot for The Force Awakens in particular, especially because of the genuine hype it gave me, and renewing my passion for Star Wars. And very few other movies can actually rival how huge The Force Awakens was for me. So, yeah, I think that's really about it in terms of my experiences with The Force Awakens and what led up to it, and just the unique times. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, in the back of my yearbook, there's actually a page like listing like, what happened in the world at the time. And actually I'll go get it right now. Okay, so I brought the yearbook from my freshman year of high school, and so the back of this page, again, it lists off like, major events and like pop culture things that happened during that calendar year. This is the stuff for the movies. Like it lists off other things like even Inside Out, which again, I didn't actually watch until like 2019 or 2020. Kind of regretted that, but check this out. The Force Awakens took up an entire page. Like that's how huge it was. Yeah. And I think then again, my high school years were kind of defined by, new Star Wars movies coming out. Rogue One during my sophomore year, Last Jedi during my junior year, and then Solo at the end of my junior year, and then Rise of Skywalker came at the end of 2019, which was the calendar year I graduated high school. Now, like I said, again, like, I do hold a bit of a soft spot for The Force Awakens, especially. It's definitely the least offending of the sequels, and it really did have a lot of potential for what could have been and where they could have gone with it. And even Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, I don't really hate, but I do understand like why all the issues behind it. Even Force Awakens, like I don't entirely agree with the whole A New Hope retread argument either. Yeah, and of course, in retrospective, like I also want to avoid the toxic behavior exhibited by fans, both the people who claim that no, there's nothing wrong with the sequels, and also the people who try to blatantly deny that the sequels ever existed. I mean, yes, like I understand the issues, but you don't need to be toxic and just pretend that they never happened. Whether you like it or not, the sequels happened, all right? But yeah, like I'm really glad that The Force Awakens provides some of the most unique movie viewing experiences I've ever had. And I mean, you're going to hear from you guys. Like, let me know, like, what your thoughts on The Force Awakens were and, like, your experiences with, like, Star Wars movies and other things. Because I just wanted to make this video just to share some experiences that have happened during, an interesting point in my life. All right, well, I'd like to thank y'all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and Rainbow Runner's going to be heading out. May the Force be with you.